You may want to use full screen, Ibrahim, and we will be waiting until everyone joins in before we start. So we usually wait a few minutes after 1 to make sure we give time to people to join. So we have a few more minutes waiting. Okay, I think we can start our meeting. Good morning, everyone. I apologize, I don't have a camera, but I'm using a temporary computer. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So today we have Ibrahim as our speaker. And so as usual, we will be recording this session. And just for today, exceptionally, I'm going to apologize. I will have to leave. My mother is in the hospital, so I would have to leave in half an hour. And Beata Drexler, Brahim's advisor, is with us in the seminar, and in the end of the session she will be leading the discussion. The seminar is in good hands, and without any further ado, Brahim, please, you can start with your presentation.
Salimata.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. So I'm Ibrahim Dhaini. I graduated with a degree in landscape architecture, and I'm currently doing my master's in urban planning and policy. The presentation today is it's actually part of my thesis findings about using virtual reality as a tool for participatory planning in Biosphere Reserves, and we'll be having Jabal Moussa as a case study. And so, Okay, so the objective of the thesis is to test the validity of virtual reality as a tool for participatory planning in Biosphere Reserve. So for that, we're going to use the following methodology. At first, we're going to start with the literature review, so to understand the definitions, identify gaps, and act accordingly. And then we go into the case study profile to understand the context of the Jabal Moussa and the site of study. And then we're going to have a participatory workshop that uses VR as a tool. And the tool is compared to a VR as a new tool. It's compared to 3D physical model as a rather a more traditional way of doing participatory workshops. And after that, participants will be asked to answer a questionnaire. And from that, we derive conclusions and maybe assess the validity of the tool. So with that, we're going to kick off with the research question. Is VR an effective tool for core design to rehabilitate quarries in Jabal Moussa Biosphere Reserve? So as we said, we're going to start with literature review. By definition, it's participatory planning is involving stakeholders and local community in the planning decision-making process, where planners collect the viewpoint of people and attempt to create a project and achieve a design through consensus. And there are various types to planning, to participation, deliberative, and advocacy. And the diagram you see on the right is Einstein's ladder of citizen participation. So the further we go up in the ladder, the more citizens
Rahim,
are
we lost
involved
you
in the
here.
planning.
Rahim, can you repeat?
Okay.
Because we lost you.
Okay, you can hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so I was defining participatory planning as a tool. I stopped at the Einstein's ladder for citizen participation. So it's the ladder you see on the right. So the more you go up onto the ranks, the more citizens are actually involved in planning. So in this workshop, we're aiming to achieve the top 3 ranks where citizens have a say in decision-making process. After that, our second definition is Biosphere Reserve. They are natural zones that are protected due to the special interest those ecosystems possess, and they adopt appropriate zoning schemes that allow sustainable development to follow participatory governance systems supported by local dwellers. With that said, Biosphere Reserve are heavily based on community. So we can see the correlation between the concept of Biosphere Reserve and participation. And then there's the MAB or Man and Biosphere program, which emphasizes the importance of effective, equitable, and participatory planning for sustainable development. So this is a reason why we're choosing Biosphere Reserve to perform a participatory planning project. And our third and final definition is virtual reality. It is a computer-generated environment where users get the perception of being inside a real world. And with that said, as with everything else, VR is gaining increasing interest in urban planning application because the tools are interactive and they have a huge potential to enhance participation and improve the planning process. So after we went over the terms, now we move into the case study analysis. So the diagram here is a research in progress. I was doing with Dr. Biata, which we were doing a quantitative systematic reviews on articles that involve participation in the reserve. I'm not going to go over the numbers for the scope of this presentation, but we started with around 6,000 articles, and we screened them down into 37 articles that actually use the VR in a topic related to urban planning. And this research helped us identify gaps on which to base our research. So regarding VR, our findings state that VR wasn't very often used for participatory planning projects. And even when they used the VR, it was mostly used either to gather data or view data, but not to actually model and construct scenes. So VR was not used to its full potential. And furthermore, the participatory projects didn't take biosphere reserves as a context. So according to our research, it hasn't been done before. And regarding participation, and this is strict to the context of Lebanon, so our planning is strictly top down, and citizens' participation does not exist. And even in the legal framework, there is no classification related to biosphere reserves. So they're designated as protected areas, but they're not. They don't have their own unique classification, which can cause a little bit of problems in relation to the Man and Biosphere program. So moving on to the case study profile, I assume like Jabal Mousse has been introduced in previous sessions. I'm gonna only introduce the part that's related to participation, since Jabal is currently being managed by APJM,
We
the
lost
Association
you
for the
again.
Protection of Jabal Moussa. Okay, now you can hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so as I was saying, I'm gonna go for a quick introduction about Jabal Moussa and how they relate to community engagement and participation. To begin with, they have several community engagement activities like the native tree nurseries, rural products, wildlife database, and citizens are often included and empowered throughout the activities of the reserve. So they're all part of it. And this is very important because Jabal Moussa is part of the Man and Biosphere program, and that's why we it's a very suitable place to have a participatory project. For the project context, which is the direct site where we will have our workshop, it's the pond rehabilitation project in Ahmes. So the reason we selected it is because there's an already ongoing project that is happening there, and by Edu-BioMed and the everyone on the team. So there are already intentions to rehabilitate it and to fix it. So we might as well include the people inside it. And the site is interesting for participation because there's a huge conflict of interest over there. There are multiple stakeholders who want to have different things going on site. And the site is multifunctional. The rehabilitation is proposed for biodiversity, for tourism, for bird watching, and for many other activities. So that's why we went for that. Now we move on to the workshop methodology, which is the VR workshop. The aim for that is to have two parallel workshops with an equal number of participants. The first workshop uses virtual reality, and the other one uses a physical model, and we compare the results. We started by selecting the headsets. We had available two headsets. One is the Google Cardboard, the other one is Oculus Quest. And Google Cardboard is actually affordable, so it's at $15, so it's relatively accessible and anyone can buy it and insert a smartphone in it. Oculus Quest was more expensive, so this was at first a limitation, but thanks to Edu-BioMed, who secured those equipments for us. And as we did this comparison, Google Cardboard has a very low interactivity because there is only one button and there is not more. The options are very simple. You cannot move around a lot inside it. Whereas Oculus Quest, there is actually a whole new world inside this headset, and you're able to go right, to go left, and to move. And there are countless options and buttons of what you can do. With that said, Google Cardboard has a very simple interface, as this was its main limitation. Oculus Quest 2 requires more we need to look more into technical aspects. To have participation, we have to have, I'll get into that later, we have to have a stronger internet connection. And both headsets were easy to develop and teach, but we chose to settle for Oculus Quest because of the high interactive features and because it was accessible for us. So we saw much more potential in using it. Our next step was to construct the VR scene. Our first attempt was to construct. It's a failed attempt actually. We had drone shots by Professor Wissam Melhem. He took drone shots of the entire area, and then we inserted them into a software called Agisoft Metashape, and it actually constructs scenes through a technique called photogrammetry, which means image processing and making them into models. We started by that, but the software took like days to process, 2 or 3 days, and then we had a failed scene. It was very distorted. So we went into the final scene you see on the right. We had the contour lines available on AutoCAD. So we used a mix of 3ds Max and AutoCAD and GIS to make this topographic model. And this model was inserted into the software of Gravity Sketch. Now, to talk to you about Gravity Sketch is the software we use for the participatory workshop. It's a very interesting software because it has the option of a shared room. So participants can be like at 8, 9, or up to 10 inside one room. They work on the same model together in real time, and they model together. So we use that for it. So, and inside the software, we inserted this model and we did the trees at a very low poly, so that because if the file becomes heavy, it will begin to glitch. So this is how we constructed the scene. Now I wanted to focus on this virtual model because I tried to make it resemble the physical model. I'll show you in the next slide. So as you can see here, the physical model, we try to make it exactly the same as the virtual. So it's a layered topographic model, also cut on AutoCAD. And the trees, they have the spiral form to look exactly like the trees inside the VR model. So the goal behind that is to have exactly the same conditions between the two workshops we intend to do, and the only variable being the tool and not the method or anything else. Before we went for the actual workshop, we decided to start with a dry run using VR, so to avoid any potential issues, potential problems, etc. So the dry run was done on students at AUB. The students they had the VR set, and they had a virtual scene of a fictional site. They were asked to design and work on it. And in the screenshot you see on the right, you see like the multiple headsets, and you see the screen and the multiple and the library of the models they can actually put on the website. So students were, as they were designing, students in the VR, they were not given enough time to play with the tool. So they were not given enough time to play with the tool and to experiment with it. So they weren't very familiar with the interface. So the VR workshop was actually chaotic. As you can see in the model screenshot on top, it was a mess all over. So we took this as a note. So in the actual workshop, they have the time to train and experiment before they start designing. And they were also the students were also asked to design in a virtual model you can see on below. And I took the students' feedback, and they all complained from the lack of time to understand the tool and to play with it. So this was a note we took carefully for the actual workshop. After we did the dry run, our second was we attempted to have the actual workshop. Our first plan was to have it in Jabal Moussa and invite people from the local communities, from the multiple stakeholders, and people who are interested in the workshop. But this wasn't possible because we faced numerous issues. I actually went for a site visit there to test, to experiment and explore the location of where it's possible to have the workshop. For the issues faced, first of all, internet connection was not secure, and we needed to have a fast connection for the headsets. And maybe like inviting participants, summoning them, organizing transportation. Sorry, it was such a hassle. And because at that time the fuel crisis in Lebanon was at its peak, and it was very difficult to commute. And then to avoid any potential conflicts, we decided to go for our plan B. which is to have a workshop at the AUB. The workshop as AUB wanted to mimic the exact same setting of the Jabal Moussa, but instead of having people from the community, we'll have people from AUB, from their different categories, like faculty, staff, students, etc. So we wanted to have 3 workshops, uh, 3 each, like 3 for VR and 3 for physical model. But we got very low response rate from the email invitation, so we settled for 1 workshop each. And the outline was for the workshop, it was participants were asked to watch introductory videos explaining tasks, goals, objectives. The goal of the video was to have the same amount of information received for all participants, so that to avoid any error from direct presentations. And you can see snippets from the videos on the right. And participants were like 16 participants, 8 per group. And after they watched the video, they were asked to design using their assigned tool. And after that, they were given a questionnaire for feedback. And those charts just show that participants come at different age groups, gender, educational level, and category, from faculty, students, staff, and graduates. So the aim of this is to make it as diverse as possible and from different backgrounds. So workshop 1 was the physical model, the model you've seen earlier. We have, and this is a photo from the workshop. They were gathered, they were asked to design, and those mini models, they were asked to put on it and fill. So it was easy to moderate, it was smooth, and they came up with their own proposal for the site. And on the same day, we had the VR workshop, which failed for a technical issue. The technical issue was that it was also noted, because at first we would have, in the dry run, we were able to have several headsets on a single account, but then the software was constantly updating. And when I reached the workshop, it failed because this option was no longer available. So each headset had to have its own account. So we took this as a note, as one of the limitations of VR, because updates may come at an unexpected time and maybe ruin a workshop, which is this workshop. So I had to cancel this workshop and do another one again. So the second attempt, after catering for this issue, participants were invited, and we went through it again, and we were able to finally successfully pull off another workshop. And as you can see from the screenshot on the right, the multiple headsets on the side, the menu, the library, and they were designing. So this workshop succeeded. And after the physical model workshop and the VR workshop was completed, participants were summoned and asked to fill in a questionnaire. So we had 3 questionnaires: 1 questionnaire for the participants, 1 for the moderator, which was me, and 1 for representative from APJM, which is Mark Atallah, he's here. And for the participants perspective, what we could extract from their information, that the 3D model group found it easier to communicate, deliver, discuss, and learn ideas. This group also demonstrated higher willingness to participate again in a similar workshop, which indicates that they were more engaged. And they achieved better consensus and agreement on the elements inserted in the design. And finally, they found it easier to work, control, and display ideas. So from the participants' perspective, it was better for the 3D model group. The only better indicator for VR, it was that they were able to better visualize the site in relation to the actual context. From my perspective as a moderator, it was easier to manage and moderate using the 3D model in the face. And as the participant said, I found it. I found the group using VR more engaged in the design. And in terms of understanding the site in relation to the context, both groups were equally able to understand the site. So I didn't find any added value for the virtual interface from this point exactly. And from APJM's representative's perspective, the 3D model group had a smoother moderation process because VR was a little bit more complicated. And but based on his realization, participant in the VR group was engaged. And despite all the complexities, his preference is to use VR for the future workshop because of the high interactivity that the tool gives us. So as a conclusion and recommendation, VR carries potential for future use for participation, but maybe now it's not yet the time for it, given the level of the technology we are in it, because people need time to become familiar with the interface. So in the future, it's expected maybe to be accessible to all, and then to everyone have VR. So it would be different. It's like the smartphones today, and VR is difficult to moderate with given the time limit, and participants can understand the site using the physical model. So in terms of added value, there is no from this point there's no added value to the VR yet. And moderating with physical model has less variables and uncertainties. By variables and uncertainties, I mean there are many issues to cater for when using the VR. So for instance, you have to look at the internet connection, to secure Wi-Fi, to make sure the headsets are full, and to set up the scene, etc. Whereas when it comes to the physical model, you just construct the model and then you can work with it. So my recommendation for the present stage of technology is to use VR. It's still a fascinating tool to me, but we can use it for professionals. So it's a group of professionals designing together in a space. But to take it for the general use of participants, maybe it's still not the time for it. So those are my findings so far for this research, and thank you all for listening.
Thank you, Ibrahim, for this very interesting presentation. And I will leave the floor for Beata to moderate this session, and I'll say goodbye to you all and thank you for attending this seminar. Beata, you want to take it from here?
Thank you, Salma. So thank you, Ibrahim, for the presentation. I don't know if anyone has any questions.
Hello?
Hello?
Yeah.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead. Sorry. Yeah.
I was asking if anyone has any questions about the workflow or our attempts or.
I'm interested in one question before I leave. What about, did you consider an integrated version where you use the model to get the group together and explain to them what the project is about and then take them into the virtual reality? Or is this hybrid method is not feasible? Is it not useful?
For this method, there are other tools for it when it comes to mixed reality, and so we went across that at one point in the research. But for the scope of this research, the aim was to actually do. We had to do this separation because we did the VR on its own, had the results, and then the physical model on its own, and we had the results. So in this way, we were able to do this comparative assessment.
Okay, thank you. And the other question, when you say you asked the general public, because your participants were like reflective of community members, when you say we ask them to design, what are you asking them to do? Can you clarify to us what is their task specifically, and what kind of information do they get, and what are they asked to do?
Yes, because when the Edu-BioMed team went for multiple visits and talks at the site, and they had interns working over there, the interns were assigned several tasks, they agreed on several elements. Like, for instance, we want to have bird watching on the site, we want to have terraced views, etc. There are like 5 or 6 elements that they already agreed on. So I used this as a guideline, and in the video they were assigned those guidelines, and then they had the physical model of those objects. And similar for VR, they had the libraries representing those elements, and based on those guidelines, they were asked to design. And in the end, they had room for more elements from their own choice. So those were the guidelines for design.
Okay.
So just to add, they were able to create their own elements that they were able to introduce. We had set of elements according to what we discussed already with Jabal Moussa Association. But for this workshop, they were free to choose and add something that they thought would be good for the site. So it was discussion all the time, and yes, we have question. Did you consider trying to gather more tech-savvy participants for the comparative assessment in order to provide a more stable ground of comparing both tools? It felt like much of the barriers was people not used to the technology rather than the actual functions and mechanics of the program. Actually, this is what was in conclusions, Ibrahim's conclusions, that for now, yes, you can do it, but with people who are used to, who know the technology and who are like professionals, as Ibrahim stated, right? Would you like to add something, Ibrahim?
Yes, and I'd like to add one thing to that, because the idea of participation or participatory planning in general, it's to involve more the general public than actually professionals in the field. So for the tool to be actually valid for participatory application, it should be suitable for people who aren't into the technology rather than the people who are actually into it. If that makes sense.
Any other questions or comments?
Okay, so this is Pierre. Hi, hello everyone. So I am one that has absolutely no experience with the technology, and so what I wanted to ask is, I understand that the people who were there designed something. Designed with tools they were given around the location there. Are there any renderings or designs that came out that we can look at, or is what I'm asking silly because I don't understand enough the technology to maybe to ask the appropriate question? Did they come up with some renderings or some layouts that we can look at? I guess that's what I'm asking.
Yes, maybe it's not to the level of renderings, etc., because the participants were not design professionals. But what they did was something rather indicative. So let's say, for instance, there's a 3D model for a terrace. So what the participant did was actually grab this 3D model and place it, let's say, beside the pond from whichever side. So this is an indication that here I want of design they have.
But
Okay.
if I can add to this, Pierre, the model is in virtual reality. So anytime you want, you are most welcome to join us and have your headset on and check what they proposed.
Okay, but did you get any? Very good, Beata. I thank you for that. But let me ask you, did you get some response that you found enlightening or different, or that gave some ideas? Or, I mean, it was just a practice exercise for now? I mean, what do you think?
Well, there were some ideas because they were discussing, but our focus was more about the process itself than the final outcome. But yes, we have the model and we have pictures of it, and we have model from in virtual reality. We can share pictures.
Okay.
So definitely you can take a look on them and see if there is anything anything new or anything that I wouldn't say that there were really very brilliant ideas, because they were, some of them, they were participating in the process for the very first time. So and the whole workshop was not so long. But the most important thing for us, and this is what we measured, is how they participated, how they were engaged, and if it is proper tool for the future.
Yes, I understand well. Thank you very much for that.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, so I think if we don't have any comments, I don't know, Ibrahim, if you would like to add something, and then we can finish our meeting. I hope you like this. Actually, we have also movies from the we saw them in like what was going on inside, and it's very funny because you can see the different participants, and you can see how they are grabbing and moving things and how they can create new things. So it's quite engaging.
From my side, no, I'd just like to thank you all for listening.
Okay, so thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
And see you next week. We'll learn about mushrooms in Jabal, Moussa. And by the way, Pierre, as you know, our students are working now. They are working already on strategies, and there are some strategies for water collection. And one of students already is focusing on quarries in the area. And his final design is going to be on the site, on the pond. So I'm pretty sure that it's going to be also virtual reality. So by the end of semester, you will receive like landscape architect proposal.
Fantastic. That is great. Thank you so much.
Perfect. Thank you very much, everyone, and see you next week.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you all.